no deal is the same. No transaction is the same. And so you're constantly finding yourself in new experiences and you're constantly learning new every day, something new every day. Every transaction, I do my best to debrief after the transaction and say, all right, what went well? What could we have improved upon? And then I look at my systems and processes because, everybody on my team knows I say it over and over again. We fall to the level of our systems and processes.
Hey, welcome back to the Real Estate Excellence Podcast. My guest today started in real estate at the age of 22. And before he turned 30, he had been part of over 1,000 transactions. He didn't just sell Tampa Bay, he helped build it. Literally branding and selling entire communities that are on the map today. He's is a Tampa native, licensed lender, a luxury specialist, and one of the most well-rounded real estate minds in the state of Florida. From new construction to luxury condos to relocation, this conversation covers it all. Let's welcome Craig Kincheloe to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Tracy. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot in there, because everything you've got experienced is a hot topic right now in Florida. And I'm over here in Jacksonville. You're over there in Tampa. I think they're under similar demand, especially a lot of new construction going on. And I'm sure you have some insights on that. And then what is one of the questions I was reviewing the format today and what we were going to be talking about, is it a buyer's market is one of the things we're going to talk about. It's like a trending question right now. Is it a buyer's market? Well, it depends really on the price point right now. Would you agree?
Yes, and even more than that. So the way I like to describe it is it depends on the property type, number one. We're talking about a single family home, or are we talking about a condo, townhome, a villa, whatever the property type may be. So that's what I start with. Then price range, as you mentioned, and then location. And location could be a neighborhood, it could be a zip code, it could be streets that are geographic boundaries. It's all over the place. So you can't answer that question in today's market accurately. You have to really define it down. And when somebody tries to answer that question straight up, it tells me their lack of knowledge and experience.
Yeah. We're definitely seeing the right houses, which is basically what you're describing, the right house, having that on the right street, right zip code, whether it's a townhouse or single family, or if it's priced right, it's got that location, it could go on the first weekend, where others are sitting for, 30, 45 days, 60 days.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. I mean, I could look at properties within a 1 to 2 mile radius of each other. So pretty much similar location, you would think, right?
Yeah.
And I could look at one and I could say, all right, there's 15 sales, 15 properties for sale in this neighborhood of this building. And over the last 6 months, only one sold. But then a mile away, I could say, there's 4 for sale, but over the last 6 months, there's been 24 sales. So, not to get too technical, but in the real estate industry, we use something called month supply of inventory. And basically all that means is if no new homes are listed for sale based on the current sales rate on a monthly basis, it would take X number of months to sell all the homes currently for sale. And so in that example, the first example is a 7.5-year supply of inventory, which is worse than the Great Recession that we experienced in 2008, 9, 10. Actually worse. And then, the other situation was like a 1.5 month supply of inventory. So that is just mind blowing if you think about it in terms of the numbers and how they're all in a similar location. So you really have to look at that carefully.
Yeah. So not a straight answer to that. I totally agree that we're experiencing that over here, and I imagine other parts of Florida as well. People are looking for specific things, and if it fits it, the right schools, whatever, it's gone. Let's go back. I always like to, especially the agents that are listening, a little bit about you, how you got into real estate. You started in new construction, which I think is a home run for a young person who may be wanting to get in real estate, but obviously maybe doesn't even have their own first house. They haven't bought their own first house yet, really don't know a lot about it. I would imagine, did new construction really help you, get off the ground and give you some ground to stand on to really launch your career?
Yeah. So I got licensed when I was in college. I was a junior in college during the summer, and I got licensed. And then I ended up actually dropping out of college shortly thereafter, and got my mortgage license. Did that for a year and a half while I got into the new construction industry. It was a tough job to get there as a young 22-year-old when the market was booming back in 2003, 4. But I finally got the job, and it taught me a lot, because I was selling so many homes in a short period of time. I had sold, 9 communities. We were developing so much. Then I became portfolio manager of another home builder where we were building around 700, 800 homes just in that division. So it gave me a lot of experience in a short period of time. And it taught me the way builders think, the way they run their businesses, and all those things that now helps my clients, buyers buy, because they operate very differently than a normal seller.
For someone thinking about getting in the business, I always think that, the podcast is either talking to someone new getting into business, or maybe someone who's been in the business for a little bit and not really getting the at bats that obviously you got early, and they've taken advantage and has made a difference in your career. You're now 20 going on 24 years that you've been in the business now, or am I calculating that right? 20, 23 years. I mean, having that confidence, because like you said, you're in that model. The people are coming to you. Where today, obviously, you spend most of your time marketing and then working with clients. So it flips. So you let the builder do the marketing, the subdivision's there, and you're just practicing every day with new customers coming in, practicing your spiel, practicing, everything from the handshake on, and how that gave you confidence as a young person in such a demanding industry.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so they're very different skill sets in a lot of ways. And a lot of, when I had a real estate team and I was hiring agents, I hired some new construction salespeople, and many of them struggle because it's a different skill set. As you mentioned, the sales process when you're working for a home builder is, you get a captive audience. The builder spends the marketing dollars, and they get people to come to you, typically walk through your model home, and then you have a product or products that you have to sell them. Versus when you're in general real estate, you have to go out and proactively find the clients. Usually you have to do your marketing, your lead generation, whatever you do to find the clients. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the salespeople from the new home, they don't like that. They're not comfortable with that. And so they do struggle. And many times they go back into new home industry. So those are very different things. The thing that I liked about the new home industry that it's helped me is understanding the product at a high level, right? So I need to understand the quality of the build, the finishes, all those things that go into it. Most real estate agents, if they don't have that background, they don't have that knowledge or that skill set that I have from the new home building industry. And I'm very grateful for that.
Have you seen, because I think, would you spend about 5 years or so with the new, about 5 years, the incentives that are being given today? I mean, during that time period, I think if I remember off your LinkedIn, your dates, you were in the new construction up until about 2007. Is that about right?
Yeah, the end of 2007, right before 2007.
So it started to fall off at that time. But the incentives, did you ever? I mean, in all your years, some of the incentives that these builders are doing to attract buyers. I mean, the amount of money they're fortunate enough the appraisals come in to cover all of this. But the incentives they're giving, and not only to the buyers but to the agents to attract business right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's incredible. So I got a little bit of that at the tail end of my career in the new home building industry because the market did start to shift. I was in Sarasota at the time. That market started to shift sooner than a lot of Florida areas. So we were doing like 3-2-1 buy downs. We were selling the payment back then. We were doing emotional staging, doing some different creative things, offering real estate agent bonus commission and things of that nature. So I got to understand, how to navigate in a challenging market and still be able to sell and move homes. In fact, we had 120 finished inventory, and they wanted us to get those sold within 6 months, and we got them sold within about 90 days through selling the payment, making it affordable on a monthly basis for people. And so that's what builders are doing today. And most of the best opportunities right now are on the new construction side of things, because most people don't know this, and I don't want to get too technical, but builders have an unfair advantage compared to like a normal seller, because they can go and they can pre-buy mortgage money Normally, to get an interest rate down, like if you're buying a resale home, for example, you could ask the seller to contribute towards your closing costs, and then you could use that to buy the rate down. But there's limitations based on loan program. It could be 3-6% generally is what you see, depending upon how much you're putting down. So you have a finite amount of money to work to get that interest rate down. But these builders are going to the lenders in advance, and they're saying, I'm going to buy, $5 million, $10 million worth of money. You have to use it by this, and it's for a neighborhood or a division. And they're able to get that off the closing statement. So you can still get your 3-6% seller concession, but they're able to get the rate down to 3.9, 4.25 on a 30-year fixed. So the builders are just able to outmaneuver a typical seller. So if you're a buyer, you want to take advantage of that because you can get a great payment right now.
Tell us and sell yourself a little bit on this, because I think this is very important. As you and I know, there's still people just literally just walking in to the model home and working directly with the site agent. You've been a site agent. You're now a successful team leader, a successful agent yourself. Why is it important, especially with all these incentives, that they connect with you to lead them through this process?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, like negotiating with a builder is very different than negotiating with a normal seller. And so I have insider information on how they operate. So, most of these builders, especially if you're working for the large ones, they're usually publicly traded. And so they have shareholders, they have, forecasting numbers and things like that. And so if you understand that and you understand their fiscal end of the year, their end of their quarters, how they function, where they're at in their numbers, and the right questions to ask the salespeople with the builders, you can negotiate incredible deals, especially right now in the market. So that's one thing, is understanding the negotiating. Then also understanding they would rather give you free upgrades, they'd rather give you special financing, or they'd rather give you closing costs than reducing the price, because they reduce the price, then that gets recorded on the public record of the property appraisers, and so it hurts their future comparable sales, and
Right.
It's public information, right? So you got to understand those things and know how to negotiate with them. And, you can get really, really good deals right now, and understanding how builders, margins work, and understanding that they will sell a home for a loss at the end of their fiscal year if the home can be finished and delivered, because they do not want to have finished inventory rolling over to that next fiscal year. So it's just a matter of whatever offer you make, they're literally going to accept it, assuming they don't have another offer that's higher.
Right. Right. It sounds like a car dealership.
Yeah. Yeah.
Way this guy said they work the same way, man. They got to get that end of the month units out. In this case, obviously the carry over the inventory, because people don't realize you've got a completed home that's got an occupancy permit now, and it's the 1st of January in Florida. You're now paying the higher taxes.
Yeah, absolutely. And also builders, one of my friends is a top sales rep for a large home builder. And he told me, he's like, we look at our finished inventory as like food, perishable food on the shelf. The longer it sits on the shelf, the less it's going to be worth. And, then they're going to have to discount. So they want to get that finished inventory off their books, separate from their forecast and their finishes, their numbers for the quarter or for the year. But they look at it like that as well.
There's no doubt for anyone listening right now. I mean, you've got to get connected with someone like Craig. Obviously, Craig knows the Tampa area. He's been on both sides. He's been doing this for a couple decades. And to sit down and have a buyer's consultation with you, and then what neighborhoods are going to be obviously ideal or hot right now. I imagine because you've been in that business and you've been there long enough, you have connections such as your good friend there working at some of these builders. Like, hey, where's the soft spots? Where can I get the deal to help to get these guys in their ideal home for the best situation financially?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the relationships are key, because builders don't put all their inventory online. And even when you walk into the model home, a lot of times they're not going to share with you all their inventory, because, they don't want to make it feel like there's scarcity. Right. And so a lot of times they're not going to share all their inventory that they have for sale. So it's understanding that and fighting for that. I mean, I've a lot of times buyers will go look at homes, without me, and they'll call me, and they, maybe they negotiate a little bit, but then they'll call me and I'm able to negotiate a far better discount than what they were able to negotiate, just because I understand how to speak to the builders. And most of the sales reps, if you have relationships with them, they want to sell a home. So they're going to give you some insight if you know the right questions to ask.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, and not every builder's the same either. So knowing that knowledge of where their soft spots is, with appliances, with fixtures, whatever that thing is that you can do, and that's the knowledge that you bring to the table and the value. Do not go to new home construction without having representation. All right, 2007. What occurs there? You obviously, we know the market's going sour. But you get out of new construction, you make the move to get out, I call it retail real estate out there. What goes on there in your life, and what made you want to make that change?
Yeah, so my plan when I got my license was to become a new home salesperson, work my way up, become vice president of sales, then become division president, and do that for a number of years, and then break out and become my own home builder and developer. That was the path. And then obviously 2007 happened. They had created a role for myself called portfolio manager that allowed me to manage all their portfolio of homes across all their neighborhoods within that particular division. And so I really loved that role and enjoyed it. But once we sold all those inventory homes, they were not building homes to the same level. So they really cut back on production. We had about 250 or so employees. We went down to about 50 employees. And, for somebody that's in their their early 20s, it was an eye-opening experience, seeing a lot of good people being laid off that had been with the company for 20 plus years, when they were really great at their job. And so I had never seen that before. So long story short, once we sold all the inventory, then they wanted to put me back into a neighborhood, and they only wanted to release maybe a couple new home starts for the month. So no matter how hard I worked, I could only sell, maybe 2 at the most. I had a sales partner in there, so maybe 1. And so my income would have been, at best case scenario, 1/3 of what I was used to making, more like probably like a quarter. So I decided, I could power through it and just realize, my income's going to go down, or I could look to other alternatives. And so I used, my knowledge of builders, and I went out on my own and found investors that wanted to buy builder inventory. And we created, I won't get into the details, but we created a very interesting structure that worked for the builders, didn't slash pricing in terms of what was included in public record. So they didn't upset their prior, homeowners and stuff like that in the neighborhood, that they were destroying values. And it worked for my investors because they were able to get it at a good price through our creative structuring. So I sold a lot of real estate over about a year doing that, but that was a short-lived.
You kept afloat while a lot of others obviously were dropping out of the business at this point. You're 7, 8 time period, 9, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I what you'll see in my career is constant evolution with the market. Generally, it's, you have to evolve if you want to be able to survive in real estate, in my opinion, just because it's ever changing with the market conditions, the economy, those types of things. Yeah. So so I did that, and then I evolved again, started a short sale company with some business partners that were in the lending industry, and we started a company called Short Sales for Agents, and we negotiated short sales on behalf of real estate agents across the Florida, and did that. And then I transitioned into listing short sales, and at one point I had over 120 listings, short sales, in probably 8 or 9 different counties throughout the state of Florida, and was expanding that way. So I've had a very evolving career. And then that kind of transitioned into selling all these distressed properties to investors. I'm like, why am I making all these people money? I should be buying some of these properties and, either flipping them or keeping them as rentals, et cetera. So I got into investing and flipped a lot of properties during that period of time. And then, short sale wave came to an end, right? Like a lot of things in the real estate market. So I had to evolve again. And that's when I evolved into, more of what I'm doing now, traditional real estate, retail real estate, as you say.
Was one of your keys, you said you had 120 short sales going on at the same time. My wife and I bought in 2000, was actually right at the end of 2008. The rates had started to drop. It was Thanksgiving of 2008, because I remember specifically, I was working actually at Quicken Loans at the time. In Halloween of 2008, 6.25 was the 30-year fixed. By the time we made an offer, which was the day before Thanksgiving, The rates had actually, the offer was accepted the day before Thanksgiving. We were at 5 3/8 on a 30-year fix. And this is for an employee pricing at Quicken. So I was like, oh my God, I got to lock that in. But the rates obviously continued to fall. We bought a foreclosure. We, fortunately enough, the agent, whatever the listing, whatever the connection was, they had a direct connect to the person at the bank making the decision. We literally got a response. If it wasn't a day, it was 2 days, which is, I imagine you will explain, it's very rare to get that kind of response. What did you learn was the way to help move some of these short sales so they weren't sitting around for 6 and 12 months without getting any answer from the banks and the lenders?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with having, a good short sale package and making sure that you have all the documentation that the lender is requiring on the front end, and it's all organized in a nice, neat fashion. That is the number one reason why short sales get delayed. It's just incomplete packages. So that's number one. And number two is, understanding what the banks look for and understanding, like, I knew what Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac would accept based on the BPO, broker's price opinion. They would hire an agent and come out there to evaluate the property. Sometimes they'd hire an appraiser, but usually it would just be a real estate agent. And so I would meet them out there. I would influence the value. I would have repair estimates and things like that. So that would also help me set up for success. And then having contacts and relationships. I use different softwares to find different people within the companies. And I also was, at the time, a certified distressed property expert, CDPE, but I also coached with the founder of that company, Alex Sharfin and Katie Sharfin. So I work with them, and I was doing a luxury short sale. There was 3 mortgages totaling close to $4 million, 3 mortgages by the same lender. I won't name the lender, but I was at this conference in Vegas, and this guy was on stage speaking and said he was with this lender. So I followed him, chased him to the bathroom when he was done speaking. And I told them about this short sale. I said, they kept telling me it's an executive review. They've been telling me this for weeks, and I just can't get anything done. He's like, well, I am the executive review.
There you go.
And so just like you said, the 1 to 2 days after, we were stuck for weeks, and he got it moved forward and we got it approved. 3 mortgages. My client was happy. It was, pretty good celebrity. Most people would know. And we were able to do it discreetly without ever putting it on the market. So we got to protect his identity in that form or fashion. And so it was a win-win. But relationships, a lot of things in life come down to relationships too.
Now, when you went to this conference and to hear him speak, you didn't know that you just knew that he worked for the lender. You didn't know that he was actually the decision maker.
No clue. No, okay. I just knew that he worked for that lender and he was pretty high up. But yeah, I was dumbfounded when he said, I am the executive review. And even at that point, I is this guy serious or not?
Right.
And he was serious.
Can we go have lunch? That's right. Yeah. We started off the show a little bit about a buyer or seller's market. I think we're experiencing it here in all over Florida. Certain properties are hotter than others. When you're out working with a buyer right now, and because there are some that think they're going to go around and steal. I think there's always somebody that wants to offer, well below the price point than what's acceptable. And then, of course, there's others properties that I'm sure you experience, as I know a lot of agents here in Jacksonville. If you price that property wrong, or the seller says, no, I want to get this much more than what you're recommending, a lot of times that property sits and it ends up costing you money, and you sell it below what you probably, if you listed it correctly, is what a lot of times, if they list it correctly, they will get the showings and so forth. But how do you have that discussion with that buyer? And maybe you could think of a recent story, someone you may taken out in the last few months, where they were looking at different properties, and where one neighborhood, they really don't have leverage, but the single family home over here, like you were saying, it could be, the next neighborhood over, they do have leverage. How do you help coach your buyers in obviously making an offer that's hopefully going to be accepted?
Yes. So I'm a very data-centric agent. Most agents are not. So I everything comes back to data for me and what I review with the clients. So one thing that I do that I know most agents don't do, and I always wondered if this made a difference. And one of my clients on a big luxury sale, we had some inspection issues, and he was going to cancel. And so I did research, and the property that he was under contract on was at the end of a cul-de-sac on the intercoastal. So he had like 400 feet of intercoastal water frontage view. I mean, it was just spectacular. Mm-hmm. And so there's only so many streets that have we call them fingers, the cul-de-sacs that have houses at the end of it. So I just did a search like the last 4 or 5 years. How many of those types of homes sold? And I just said, hey, I get it. There's some inspection issues and they're valid concerns. However, if you want to be at the end of the cul-de-sac and you want to have 400 feet of water frontage, you want this, this, and this. Over the last 4 years, there's only been one other home that's sold. So before you cancel, just make sure that that's not important to you. And after the fact, after he closed everything, he's like, you know what? He's like, I was canceling 100%. He's like, that got me. And it's not, he didn't say that got me, but he said, that's what got me to move forward with it. And he's happy there now. So the point is, we have to establish context as an agent. And so, if they're looking for a specific type of property, is this a dime a dozen property? If we don't get the deal done, is there 3 of these coming on the market every month that are going to be somewhat similar to it? Or is it one of those properties where it's a very unique property and it could be years before another one comes on the market? So number one, I got to understand their criteria and what's important to them. What are the requirements of the property for them? Meaning, if it doesn't have this, they're not even going to consider that. And then I got to establish historical data as to how rare it is. And so I'll back it all up with data. A lot of agents will just say, well, right now there's only one for sale like this house. Okay, well, that's right now, but let's go back in time, because the best predictor of the future is the past. So I'm going to go back in time and see, maybe it's just right now there's only one for sale, but if I go back in time, there's going to be a lot more likely to come on the market. So it works really well with my buyer clients because it takes my opinion out of it and it puts it on to the data. Yeah. And ultimately in this market, one of the toughest things any agent's going to tell you about working with a buyer is creating urgency. A lot of buyers lack urgency. And so I'm not unnecessarily creating urgency when there's urgency is not warranted. However, there are many times where urgency is warranted. So it's my job to guide them in that.
You make me think of that one in the hand is better than two in the bush is the phrase I was thinking while you're talking about it. Like you said, that was a unique property. They don't come up often. You've got it in hand. You're under, it's his to buy. And if he walks away with it, the fear of loss is another phrase we could bring up there. What have you learned? Because your market's a little different. Tampa Bay has got a lot of water, obviously, in all certain, whether it's on the intercoastal or canals, the bay, whatever it may be. So you have unique geographics, which give you a lot of exposure to, I think, more luxury homes possibilities, but also you have high-rise condos that, go for, the high dollar price point as well, which is unique. We've only got a few of those here in Jacksonville, nothing like what you've got in Tampa, St. Pete, and that kind of thing. What have you learned in your 20 some years being in the business of working with some of these luxury home buyers, the multi-million-dollar home buyers that have probably made you even a better agent for those buying, say the average, home at, $500,000-$600,000, I guess right now, I don't know, that might be in a subdivision that everyone thinks, oh, that's easy. That's a subdivision or new construction, blah, blah, blah. But because you've been dealing with these luxury buyers, you had to really, I would imagine, fine-tune your knowledge, your preparation, et cetera, to obviously, because they'll go find someone else if they don't feel you're giving them the value.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, expertise and saving them time are important. And so you got to understand what they value and be able to deliver on that. And yes, working with many of them, definitely, because they're all, there's a few different types. There's the type that are super busy with their businesses or their careers, and they just want to have a professional handle everything that they can trust and they can rely on, and they're going to be pretty hands-off on the process. And so it's important that they hire the right person because they're going to be very hands-off in the process. And so for those people, you just got to be able to deliver. You got to be able to communicate clearly. You got to be able to set expectations. And then you got to be able to go above and beyond in terms of doing more for them, whether that's finding them vendors, getting them quotes, it's just working directly with the builder, doing more things for them to make their lives easier. Right. And so those are one camp. And then there's the other camp that likes to be involved in the whole process. They like to be very collaborative, and that's how they got to be successful. So they want to learn a lot about the process and stuff like that. And so those people, yeah, you got to be better on your game, and you got to be really knowledgeable, because especially now with AI, they're all using AI. I mean, I just sold a condo with a lady who's a business consultant, and I mean, we were very collaborative, and she used AI for so many things, even negotiating. She would come up with different frameworks from AI that we would discuss, and I would tell her, here's this part's spot on, this part's wrong, and here's why it's wrong. So we'll take this. I already had this in my notes. We'll remove the other stuff. So it's a very collaborative process.
I don't know. Can you remember maybe something specific that I'm just really curious of, like, what did she ask AI to give her, and what did it give? And then obviously, how did you clean it up for her?
Yeah, great question. So this condo had an $86,000 assessment, and the condo probably could have sold close to $1 million like 3 years ago. But now it's an $800,000 condo essentially. And it's a new condo. I want to make sure that this is understood, because yes, the condos that are 20, 30 years older are declining in value more than the newer condos. That is a fact. However, this condo was built in 2007, so it wasn't even subjected to the milestone inspection report because it was, not old enough, right? Mm-hmm. So it didn't qualify. However, through the SIRS report, and there was, some structural things that needed to be worked on. And so there was a $6.5 million project underway. So she used AI to, how do we frame the benefit to the buyer of this $86,000 assessment? So we used that, or she used that for that. And we kind of collaborated, and it did come up with some good positioning on that we used. And then when we would do price adjustments, that was another big thing that she used it for. When we were considering or doing price adjustments, then she would use it for that. And so, again, some of the stuff was good and some of the stuff was not so good. In terms of like specific examples, I'm trying to think. Yeah, nothing comes to mind off.
But I mean, it had an $86,000 assessment on it. So obviously that's, like, you got to overcome that objection on it. But I think what also people don't realize, different in a condo, for the buyers listening right now, if you've got a large condo complex and there are other sales in there, those are going to be a lot of times your biggest comps. Weighting everything, the building, 3 buildings down, further down the beach isn't comparable when you got sales in the complex right there in front of you. And obviously all of them have the $86,000 assessment against them as well.
Yeah. And the challenge, nothing was moving in that building in several months. And so everything was just sitting on the market. Right. And so, I do my own research, but differentiation, it's like, if there is 6 other condos for sale in that building, or 7 other condos, when historically there's only 1 or 2 listed for sale at a time, well, how do we differentiate ourselves? What's different about our listing? And that's where I excel.
Yeah.
I'm really, really good at understanding differentiation and being able to craft a compelling story that resonates with prospective buyers, that causes them to move. So that's, and she came up with some stuff like that, but more so, AI sometimes will just give me ideas, and then I'll just, fine tune it.
Yeah. You hope it. I mean, I use it all the time. Obviously, I use it for the show and creating, a lot of the different things. And what you put, the better information you put in, obviously, the better you get out, right? The better food you eat, the healthier you are. And that's the same thing with AI. If you're not giving it the whole picture, it's only working off what's there, and and you obviously don't want it oftentimes going out and grabbing its own information that is not even relevant to the situation, which could be here in real estate. So you have to be very careful with that.
Yeah. My team uses it all the time for our digital magazine and other blog, content and stuff like that. And it's wrong so often. And yeah, so you got to really know what you're doing. It's no different than giving somebody like a race car, right? And
Yeah.
if they don't know how to drive, it's a dangerous tool because you can really get yourself in trouble. And AI is the same way. And so it's a challenge for us in the real estate industry because our clients are using it. And so it's explaining to them, where it's wrong, how it's wrong. And so it just makes us need to be better at our jobs. It's again, just like when the search portal came on, and no longer do we control the inventory as a real estate agents. They have to come to us to know what's for sale. Now they can search on their own. So we had to up our game, right? And so AI is the same. It's the same thing. We have to up our game, up our knowledge, up our expertise.
100%. All right. This is kind of one of those questions that I'm going to have you reflect back on something that happened recently. And I'm just going to read this question directly to you. Walk me through something that happened recently, a deal, a client situation, a negotiation that surprised you, challenged you, or just stuck with you. What was it and what actually happened? This is the stories you tell at cocktail parties.
Yeah, there's so many. Well, I mean, the fact that I'm still breaking records in this market. Mm-hmm. Not every sale's a record, but many sales are records, all-time records. I'll think of two right now. One is the listing side. The guy bought it for like $1.05 million 2 years ago, did a really nice high quality renovation. But there's just the comps we're not supporting. There was just zero comps in the neighborhood and even the surrounding neighborhoods. But I knew that it was a single story home, ranch style. And, there's very few ranch styles left in South Tampa. They're all getting knocked down. And the ones that are, many of them got flooded. So this was in a neighborhood where 80% of the homes got flooded, but this home did not. So I knew that was a selling feature. And then the high quality renovation, you're not going to find ranch homes that have high quality renovations quite like this. And so we priced it way above the comps, nearly 60% higher price per square foot than the next highest comp in the neighborhood. And I create buyer avatars. You know what an avatar is? Don't know what an avatar is. Basically, I come up with who I think the most likely buyers are going to be. Where are they going to be from? What are their ages? Are they going to have kids? Are they empty nesters? Do they have pets? How are they going to use the property? All those things that I come up with. And then I share that with the seller. Things that I do, I share things with the sellers before we get the property listed. So it's like, here's what I think is going to happen. Let's let the chips fall where they may and see if I'm right or not. And I said to the seller, because he had kids, I said, the person that's going to buy this home, you paid $350,000 less for this home. The person that's going to pay this price is not going to have kids. They're going to be empty nesters. And he had this beautiful oak tree in the back. And I said, they're going to want to remove the oak tree. So I'm going to get an arborist out here, make sure we can remove it, get a quote. They're going to want to put a pool in. He said, but they don't even have kids. I said, yes, but they want their kids to come visit them because they're going to be from the Northeast and they want them to come visit them. So literally, I kid you not, before we put it on the market, I did a broker's open and the buyer rents in the neighborhood, moved here from moved here from Long Island 10 months ago. They have grown kids and they want a pool. I walked them through what it would look like, how we would lay it out, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. It was identically played out 100% as I said, and we sold it for full price. They wanted an appraisal contingency. I negotiated that because it was never going to appraise. And so they removed the appraisal contingency and it appraised for $150,000 less than the contract price. So these are higher than COVID numbers. So people, when you talk about how's the market, is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? Well, it depends. And so that's an example of, it is a seller's market and, you can get a premium if you know how to do things right. And also, in the luxury market, buyers are willing to pay that premium for differentiation. If they can't get it, if they're down the street or whatever, and you did a really good job, they're going to pay that premium.
How did you come up with the avatar? If you could give us a 30-second, just like, how did you arrive at that? Because obviously, anyone going, oh, how did he figure out that avatar when the person living in it is he had kids and someone buying here would want a pool? And how did you come up with that?
Yeah. AI had 0.00% to do with it. No AI. And this is where expert knowledge outperforms AI 10 out of 10 when it comes to local real estate deals. So I basically working with buyers, showing people houses, listening to what they have to say, finding out where they're from. It's, I used to just try to sell all listings, and I got so disconnected from the market when I was doing that. And I made a shift in my business and I started working with buyers again. And I realized how much market intelligence I gained that helped me work with my sellers. And
Yes,
so
brilliant.
that's how I got it. It's just working with the buyers and selling, showing them similar properties and knowing where they're from and knowing, how they want to use the property and all that. That's how I did the avatar for this property.
That's a great story, and I'm gonna give you the raw footage from this. To cut that out and put that story that you just told there. I think it's a real testament to you and your ability there, because I mean, there's not too many agents. They would have looked at that and probably tried to talk the guy down. Hey, no, you need to sell it for less, or whatever. There's no comps to support that. We're not going to get that. And they would have had a sourpuss attitude towards it, where you took it on and knew that those avatars were out there. You just had to find them.
Yeah. In fact, there's a really successful agent that lives in the neighborhood, and he came to the Brokers Open before he put it on the market. So he didn't know what the price was. Mm-hmm. And I said, so what do you think you would list this for? And he's like, maybe 1.2, but probably 1.15 is what I'm thinking. He's like, it'll probably sell for 1.1. That's $300,000 less than what I sold it for, So, and this is not a novice agent. This is a top 1% agent. It's a good agent.
Yeah. Well, it just goes to show, Craig, your expertise and your knowledge. You're really sharpening your sword all the time. Like I said, a lot of agents, there's a lot of great agents who are good, but they just, they kind of more go through the motions, where you are, that's why you get special situations like this and some of these higher end buyers. And that's why I think I'm going to cut that video, that whole 2 or 3 minutes that you were telling that story would be excellent for your website there. Challenge here in Florida is insurance. The average Florida homeowner's insurance premium is reportedly 3 to 4 times the national average, but new data suggests things may be turning around. Citizens cut rates, 17 new carriers entered the state, litigation filings dropped significantly. I knew at one time we had more litigation going on in Florida than all the 49 other states combined. From where you sit, closing deals in Tampa right now, is the stabilization real, or are buyers and sellers still getting blindsided when it comes to insurance?
Yeah. So for the first time, I'm having clients tell me when they get their renewal that it's less. It's been a long time since that's happened. So, this all started in 2019 when Governor DeSantis finally started to do something about this. I will say he was late to the game and making legislation changes for property insurance. So, 2019, I think there was some more in 2021, 2022. So we're now finally starting to see reductions due to the legislation changes with, limiting litigation, not allowing you to sign over your beneficial interests to contractors. There's a number of things.
Yeah.
So insurance premiums are going down. I'm also seeing them going down for condo buildings too. Master insurance policies for condo high rises are starting to go down as well. So that's a positive. In terms of challenges that I see, I deal with it all the time, especially on older homes, getting things insurable. There's 4-point insurance issues that come up, roof, electrical wiring, this, that, the other. And so constantly being able to navigate through those is a challenge. And you want to work with a great agent that can navigate those through there, because a lot of times you'll just get you'll run into a wall and the deal will fall apart. Your agent isn't knowledgeable and resourceful on how to navigate those.
If you're advising your team, you're advising other agents right now, or I assume you do this, maybe you don't. I would think it's best practice. I know from a lending side, I'm ordering insurance right away. As soon as, for some reason, agents don't like to often refer insurance agents. As soon as I have the contract, I'm sending an email to my insurance agent go-to person and saying, hey, can you get me a quote? Because I know we're going to need it for initial underwrite anyway. It's nice to have a quote in there. But when you're going on that listing appointment and you've got a house that's whatever amount of years old, it doesn't look like the roof, the roof is 15, 20, 25 years old. The water heater, how old is that? Are you reaching out and having some discussions with some insurance agents to hopefully find some of the pitfalls that may come to challenging negotiations when you actually get under contract?
Yeah. So I'm going to go a little bit off track here on this answer, and I'll circle back around. So obviously, now the real estate commission, real estate agent relationship, and all that stuff has changed, right? So what I do is I try to add as much value as I can from the initial conversation with the buyer. So, a lot of my buyers will come from referrals and past clients. That's a little different. But if I get an online lead, whatever, from Zillow or from some other online lead source, and let's just say the buyer wants to see a property, and I've never spoken with that buyer, I have a whole process now that I run through. I will see what disclosures are attached in the MLS. I have frameworks in AI where I'll review them for any concerns. I'm going to try to find out, I'm going to pull permit history. I want to know, has there been a permit for the roof? Because, insurance companies now, the roof was replaced 3 years ago, but they didn't pull a permit. A lot of insurance carriers won't write that policy now. And so that's can be an issue. So I want to see the permit history. It's going to give me the age of the roof, HVAC. Most people don't pull a permit for a water heater, but I'm getting all that information before we see the property in most scenarios. So because I want to save them time, hey, listen, this has got an old roof. We'll have to negotiate a roof, this and that. If that's going to eliminate the property from consideration, I'd rather know that up front. So I try to get all that information up front and set expectations. I tell my clients that if you are surprised about something, then I didn't do my job. My goal is you to know what all the next steps are, each step of the process. So I try to get all the ages of the major components because I want to know, is there going to be insurance? Do we think there's going to be insurance issues on the front end? Now, there's two ways to handle that. We could address that in the original negotiation, or I could save that in terms of renegotiating during the inspection period. Depends if it's a multiple offer situation. Maybe we save it. There's a lot of strategy that goes into that. But we got to address the insurance issues either up front or during the inspection period. Otherwise, it's going to create an issue. And in terms of getting insurance quotes, as you mentioned, yes, I try to get insurance quotes as well early on in the process. Most of my clients are not looking above are like pushing up to their LTV max, most of them. But,
Or
the
DTI.
ones that are getting close, we want to look at that. Yeah. So
I imagine you've had this type of situation come up, recently, or, just generally over your career, but try to think of something recently where you've had some of these luxury homes sit for a while, but, maybe the listing agreement's expired, right? They come to you. It falls to you. You go in and evaluate the situation. What are some of the things you look to change? Or, if you could maybe think of a particular one that's maybe come to you that sat on the market for 60, 90 days, whatever that period of time was. They got rid of the agent that originally listed it. It's now you. What's your evaluation process? And if you could think of one you had recently, what did you actually do? And then hopefully, I assume turned around and sold it in a reasonable period of time.
Yeah, I have one right now. It's been on the market for 10 months, which is insane. And I'll be the third agent. And so, but I have a whole listing audit process. Expired withdrawn listings in 2016 to 2020 was a core pillar of my business. And then obviously there hasn't been many expired listings until more recently, the last, maybe 18 months or so. So I'm starting to make it a pillar, but I have a whole expired or withdrawn audit. I take their listing through a whole audit process. And so I'll give you one example. The 10-month one now, I'm not going to give an example because I'm getting ready to list it next week. But in terms of preparation, I can tell you a little bit about that one, and then I'll tell you one that I sold recently. So that one, I went to see the property and did an audit. Well, one of the things was the photos were they're professional photos, but they edited them very poorly. They made the mahogany floors look cherry. They were really red. And properties that have any types of wood with red undertones sell for far less money. And so they also had the color of the tile was way off. It looked really, really brown instead of like a taupe. And again, that's negative. It's just, these little nuanced things. And so I would have known that if I didn't come see the property because, first you got to sell them in the online listing, get excited enough by the photos, the property description, etc., to come see it in person. So there were getting less showings because of the way that the photos were edited. Then when I opened the door, all the blinds were closed, and the way that the house was, there just wasn't a lot of lighting, and to find light switches was hard. And I said, usually they're showing 3 properties, maybe 2, 3, 4 at a time. The buyer's agent's not going to go around and turn all the light switches on, open up all the blinds. I mean, you have a beautiful conservation lot. You can't see any of that. They're going to run through it and maybe open a couple here and there, turn on a couple light switches. The house shows horribly. Right. So the agent wasn't getting there and setting the stage, making sure the blinds were open, the lights were on, making sure that conservation view was centerfold, all those things. And then they did professionally stage it, but the staging felt cold, didn't feel very lived in. They needed to add more layering with some different things. And then they didn't have certain things staged like the lanai, which is a great selling feature. They didn't have that staged. So those are some of the things. And then they started the price a little bit high. Where they're at right now is not too high. So we're tweaking all those, but on the other side, I had a $3 million one that was on the market for 4 months and I sold it in 19 days. And what did I do there? I created a beyond the listing where I'm selling the lifestyle. I'm selling everything about what it's like to live there. It's about a 25-page document. I built out a website, I put that there. And then I created a narrative about the builders and architects. I told their story about how long they've been doing it and other projects that they've done and how experienced they are. And then I did a construction specifications list, not just the finishes of the cabinets and the countertops and the appliances, but behind the walls. I explained how it's over-engineered, far exceeds building code. And then I tied that to benefits to them, not just a feature sheet. Every agent or many agents do feature sheets, but tie the feature to a benefit to the buyer. This is selling 101. Yeah. But so few people do it.
Now, yeah, you were listing off those things. I was saying that the time, but if you want to sell $3 or $4 million homes, and obviously you get paid a little higher for those than you do a million or $500,000 home, you got to put a little extra effort in. And obviously I would imagine that probably someone who is the engineering type, or very analytical, they probably just loved your information about how it was overbuilt and those kind of details.
Absolutely. I mean, and my client was, I had 2 investors and then the home builder. I basically had 3 clients with that deal, but the builder appreciated it. The builder didn't have anything like that put together because he's a small luxury builder. These guys build 1 or 2 homes a year. So they don't have enough at bats a lot of the times to to have experience putting that stuff together. And so, it does take extra time. I have a great operational team behind me that helps me with executing on these ideas that I have. And then I use it on other listings. If it's the first time I'm doing something, then I build out a framework. We're going to reuse it. Right. And so, and I'm not the agent that's trying to sell, 200 homes a year. That's not my model. That doesn't fit my personality. I want to sell, enough that's easily manageable for me, and I can still provide the high level results, the high level service, and the experience. That's just my model.
Yeah, I mean that's first class. You're delivering a first class service, and that's why you're dwelling in these markets that a lot of agents truly get in and they just don't know how to tap into it. And it's because you're going the extra mile, and that's obviously added your longevity. Of all the great agents I've had on in your episode 322, so I've had a few hundred, on there, it's doing the extra mile. And in your case and in your market, in the price point of some of these homes that you're working with over there, that you've got to do these little extra things because they're you're dealing with unique homes, especially when you get up, there's not another $3 or $4 million home that's built just like the one you were just describing, in your stories there. And you have to pull out all the benefits of it and the features of it with the benefits, so that unique buyer, because they're going to be unique buyers, not everyone can buy a $3 or $4 million home, is going to be attracted to it, and you're going to give the service that you're giving, and obviously moving that home and within a few weeks of taking that listing. That's just a great story.
Yeah, I mean, the luxury, you're going to get a lot less showings typically, right? Because there's just fewer, by the numbers, there's just fewer people that can afford those homes. So each showing, each buyer is so much more valuable. So you have to make each one count as much as possible. And for that house, we literally only had 2 showings over 19 days. And the one that didn't make the offer was a virtual showing, and they were planning on flying to town to see it in person and possibly make an offer. So, but right now there are fewer buyers out there looking. in general, and all price ranges. Transaction volume is down as a whole. And so each showing is more valuable. You have to make the most of each showing as an agent.
Jump over to, I don't know what percentage of your business is, but I know, obviously doing the valuation of all your information, it came up with this question here about luxury condos, whether it's in downtown Tampa, Channelside, or Harbor Island right now. Once in a generation buying opportunity, or are there landmines that could turn great looking deals into financial nightmares?
The answer to that question is both. Both. So generally when there's a great opportunity, there's a little bit of chaos involved in there. And if you don't know how to manage or navigate that chaos, you can find yourself in a really unfortunate situation, right? So, yeah. So one of the things is knowing what to review and getting the right information, and then knowing how to review it. Real estate agents are not taught how to review a structural integrity reserve study. We're not taught how to reserve a milestone inspection report. We're not taught how to review a condo budget. We're not taught how to review condo financial statements. And so, in my opinion, I'm very passionate about this. It's a huge liability for our industry. It's a huge liability. And we haven't seen lawsuits that much, to my knowledge, yet, but I think they're coming. And so I was working with a buddy of mine who's a real estate attorney on creating a software that allows agents to run it through this software, and it will grade it on A through F. It will grade the structural health and the financial health of that condo building and association. And so, I started doing some of this stuff on my own, and then he started working with programmer and language model and all that stuff. And, it's interesting. So yes, there are a lot of opportunities. You have to work with an agent that knows how to navigate those things. My clients reach out to me even after they bought to review their stuff, and I just was reviewing, I think I pulled it up here, this condo. Now they bought it for less than the just market value on the property appraiser, which it's been years, probably close to a decade since I've sold a house less than that. Usually here in Tampa, they sell between maybe on the low end 125, usually like 140. So 125 to 140% of the just market value. Homes generally sell for a lot more than what the property appraiser has the value at, right?
Right.
And so they got a great deal on it, and the seller paid some of the assessments. But I was looking at the numbers, and the maintenance costs, the salaries from 2025 to 2026 went up like nearly 50%. It's like, well, how does salaries go up 50%? So I'm investigating this on behalf of my client to figure out how the heck that happened. So you really got to dig into this, and then you got to know the questions to ask the property management companies, and then also finally looking at the minutes. But you got to have the conversations with the property management companies. That's the key.
Yeah. I don't think people realize, especially if they're buying condos for the first time, obviously from a lending side, we're going in, we don't go into the minutes, but we're getting those financial reports. We're getting the inspections that needed to be done, or they call them appraisals, but it's basically for the entire complex. Is it insured properly? Obviously, because we're going to put a lien on that place, and we don't want the value to drop out tomorrow. And I think it's brilliant, like you were talking about, to create that language model where you could upload all those things, even the minutes in there, and have, because AI can read all that within a few seconds and then spit out a report that you have it trained. This is the criteria I'm looking for. Show me some of the pitfalls. That's a brilliant idea, especially if you're selling a lot of high-end condos like there are in that area.
Yeah, it's much needed. And it's funny because we've had to tweak the language model, because initially they were all getting bad ratings. And so we had to make them relative to other similar buildings in the area and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And also, so the second phase of this is that I told them, I said, I want to be able to compare, let's just say they're looking out at, I'm just making something up, Reddington Beach, for example. Right. They want to be on Reddington Beach, and there's 6 condos to choose from on Reddington Beach. Well, of the 6, which one has the best structural health and which one has the best financial health? If they're comparing, all 6, right?
Yeah.
So we're working on, things like that. But I would say right now, purchasing a condo, a high-rise condo, 3 floors or above, the more units, the taller, the more complex. It is the most complex residential transaction right now in Florida.
Yeah. 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 And from a lending side too, if you need a lender, you've got to have a lender that has a condo team. And there's a lot of lenders that actually don't want to do condos in Florida.
Absolutely. Because there's a lot of things that you need to know.
Yeah.
Lenders have to, like you said, they got to review so many things, and the insurance was an issue for a lot of times. They had the deductibles too high, and these lenders were like, I don't feel comfortable loaning on this because the deductible is too high. And what if the association doesn't have the reserves to cover the deductible?
Yep.
Now the property's in disrepair, right? So there's so many landmines that have to be navigated that the public has no idea. I mean, they are probably familiar with the Surfside collapse and some of the changes in legislation, but the reality is they don't understand all the layers that really need to be navigated.
Yeah, no, that's again another reason I'm going to chalk up, Craig. If I had a little checklist, Craig, you got to know the condo game, and because you can make a bad investment. I mean, that condo financially has issues. They put themselves into a lawsuit. Now they can only get certain type of loans, which are higher interest, if any loan at all. Affects the value of those condos overnight. And again, that's brilliant. Actually, we're talking about taking the minutes and running them through AI and say, tell me what's going on with this board right now, what they're talking about, and to bring those things out, because you could make a really bad investment. I have stories about that, but we don't have time. All right. A lot of our buyers, just like here in the Jacksonville area, but in the Tampa area, we've got a lot of buyers coming from New York, DC, Chicago. You mentioned New Jersey earlier. You've lived in many of the distinct Tampa neighborhoods. When out-of-state buyer arrives excited, financially ready, what are 2 or 3 things that they always get wrong that you have to course direct?
Well, one thing is, like, a lot of times people from out of state hear horror stories about homeowners associations. And so their first, thought is, I want to avoid homes in neighborhoods that have homeowners associations. But depending upon where they want to be in their budget, they quickly shift that thought because, a lot of the neighborhoods that don't have HOAs are, let's just say when you're driving through them, they're not exactly the most aesthetically pleasing, right? There's some exceptions to that where I work and live in South Tampa, for the most part, it's no HOA, but it's a luxury market. I mean, there are some homes that are in disrepair, but that's rare. But there are other neighborhoods that are more middle class where, the guy's got car on blocks in the, driveway or the front yard, the yards.
RVs parked in the driveway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
House hadn't been painted in 10 or 20 years. There's a tarp on the roof. It's been there for 5 years. So, so that's one where they quickly, a lot of times, change their thoughts on that. And then another little tip or trick I always tell people is, if you're thinking about buying, wherever you're thinking about buying here in Tampa, Florida in general, Publix is the most popular grocery store. They have the most locations. So I say, if you want to know what the demographics are, I can send you those. That's great. I'll send you those. But the best way is to go into the local Publix and walk through it and look around. Those are likely everyone that lives in this location for the most part. And so that's a good way to get some insight on the neighborhood. And then obviously I tell people to drive, drive it at different times of the day, different things like that. In the luxury market, there's even a lot more things that I do, in terms of it's on the water. We'll come back at dusk, see about the no-see-um or the mosquitoes, how those are, especially if it's an open pool area.
Yeah.
Lots of little details. When somebody's spending, millions of dollars, the last thing you want to do is, like, they fall in love with this beautiful pool, it's open area, your beautiful backyard, all this stuff. And then you realize, the first night you're there that, you're getting bit up like crazy. So it's just little things like that I try to think about every little detail as much as possible for them to dot their I's, cross their T's.
You said you started off in mortgages just before getting into real estate. I assume you've maintained, well, at that point, really, when you started, it didn't even need a license, but I assume you've maintained a license there. But what has that given you for, any buyer, especially buyers right now, obviously needing needing financing. They're moving in the area. Why Craig is going to help give them a leg up, because you know some of the background, some of the different loans that may help some of our buyers who are not necessarily so cookie cutter, whether they're self-employed, whatever.
Yeah. So I did let my license expire, so I'm no longer actively licensed.
Okay.
However, I know the value, obviously I know lending, I know the value of it, and
Mm-hmm.
the lending world changes a lot. So, I always try to keep up with it. I have a lot of good relationships, and I use a lot of different lenders depending upon the loan product that my client needs. So many people just do basic cookie cutter loans, but I do construction to perm loans. I do a lot of tear downs and custom builds and things of that nature. I do a lot of physician loans. I work with a lot of doctors, right? I work with, self-employed people. So sometimes, there might be, I don't do a lot of them, but sometimes we need a bank statement loan program, and then obviously jumbo, that's another realm of things. And generally the best rates are not with your normal lenders. It's normally with, asset management companies and those types of things. And so I get them, if they don't already have an active relationship, I can help them build relationships with them. So I know based on the product type, the type of loan that they want to do, where I have relationships on where to place them, right? And where to have them look to get them the best, most competitive rates, and also know which lenders deliver and are able to close on time and able to perform, right? So yeah, I stay up on all that, and that's super vitally important. I'm very involved in the loan process and in the financing process. Most agents are not. They just refer them to a lender and just say, send me over a pre-approval letter, and that's it.
Right.
So no, I'm very involved, and I don't only work with luxury. If somebody refers me one of their children or something like that, I'll work with them strategically to help them, whatever. We need to do some things to improve their credit. We'll run some credit simulations. We'll go through that. We'll talk about if they're not looking to buy right now, we'll put together, a 3, 4, 5, 6 month plan, so I do some of that still, but yeah, I'm very strategic and very involved in the lending process for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important, just like licensing for a real estate agent doesn't tell you how to be a real estate agent or anything about it. It's the same way, licensing for a mortgage. They've got some little basic little tidbits in there, but there's not anything really that's going to help you. And especially with clients that you're working with that earn their money uniquely, whether it's, knowing how a bank statement works or how a DSCR loan works, or obviously, where lenders are, because, I know the physician loans have come back. There's more offering them now than say a few years ago, but some of them have such rigid guidelines. You got to know where to take your client or make those recommendations, because obviously your goal is you want to make sure this goes smoothly and close. So it's important to have that book of lenders and know where to send, especially when someone's got a specialty loan product.
Yeah. And you are right. There's a lot of lenders now offering physician loans, but there's a lot of nuances, how many years out of residency, loan to value, there's a big variance on rates. Sometimes the ones that have the best rates have the worst underwriting process. So you got to know that, and it could delay the closing, so there's a lot of little details to know when it comes to the physician loan program, and even how they calculate their debt, their student loan debt. They don't all calculate that in the
Correct.
same way as well. So there's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot just for the audience out there, physician loans are portfolio loans. They're not sold on the secondary market like your Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, 20% down, and go loan with the W-2 income. They are portfolio loans. So that banking institution, oftentimes the banking institution that has the inside with the medical facility is oftentimes your best, because they're catering to that crowd, because they want the checking account, they want the the savings account, they want their investment accounts, whatever it may be. So they do the physician's loans to hopefully get those other businesses, because that's really what they want. So yeah, 100%. All right, this is really a fine-tuned Tampa focused question, so I'm going to say it out there correctly so all our AI searchers, when it's in the transcript, find this. And so this came obviously off your information and the answers you gave. Gasworks, linking Ybor City to downtown is under construction. The West River Walk expansion is underway. Rays Stadium, I assume they're renovating that. Moffett expanding. Tampa's urban core is being reshaped right now. For someone looking at a condo or urban property in downtown Tampa, Channelside, or Ybor City right now, how do you frame the opportunity? Is there a window here that closes before most buyers realize it was open?
Oh yeah, it's an exciting time to be in Tampa. I mean, the amount of new development is incredible. Lots of money pouring into Tampa. And yes, so some of those that you mentioned, downtown used to be a ghost town after 5 o'clock. Downtown, people came to work, and after work, they left downtown, and that was it.
Yeah.
Now you have a lot of, you have some condo high rises, but you have a lot of high rise apartment buildings. So now there's a lot of residential living in downtown, and what came with that is a lot of restaurants, bars, retail, etc. Right, and so the downtown area has changed so much, and there's a lot of people that made a lot of money buying in at the right time, especially people that bought in before Water Street or at the beginning of Water Street, which Water Street's a $4+ billion new development that's in downtown right in front of the Tampa Bay Lightning Stadium. And so understanding all that and where to buy, like the Riverwalk expansion is where I've been investing, is right around there personally, and some of my clients have as well. I also know about other developments that are going to be happening. For example, there's this one affordable housing project that a big developer bought, the developer that did Armature Works. And this is the closest residential single family home neighborhood to downtown and to the Riverwalk. But it's very transitional. It's still at the early stages. And so that's a great area to invest. Now it has gone up a lot, but the new development where the housing, affordable housing hasn't been developed. And the reason for that is because they can't, in order for them to develop it, they have to find housing for all the people currently living there. That's the agreement that they have with HUD. So I'm actually in the process of using the Information Freedom Act to find out how long that agreement is, because then I can then advise my clients and myself, because one of the strategies that I like to invest in is I try to buy something a house as close to the land value as possible, and then throw a renter in there. And then if you can service the debt, basically you're land banking at no cost. So that's the strategy that in that area, that's what's helpful. But in order to have an idea of the appreciation timeline, I need to know when that development is going to be, when it's going to begin. Mm-hmm. So I look at a lot. You're not going to find this stuff on AI. I do a lot of deep dive research in things that are not just publicly available to understand where to invest and when to invest and what that timeline is going to be in terms of getting that appreciation.
Are you finding a lot of buyers that there are thinking more from an investment standpoint rather than just, hey, I want to grow my family and I want to live in Ybor City because I'm just single and just want to hang out or whatever, but they're actually looking like, hey, where should I buy the right investment property? Where's an opportunity where, I can buy a house and know I'm only going to be here for 3 or 4 years, but because of what's going on, I'm going to see an appreciation. Do you get a lot of buyers like that?
Yeah. So I'm not a big agent that works with a lot of investors at this point in my career. However, I do have a lot of high income earners, and real estate, especially with some of the recent changes that the Trump administration did with taxes, is a great tax vehicle. So I have a lot of high income earners, especially W-2 people that have no tax write-offs, and they're getting crushed. And so they're paying 37+% in taxes. So their CPA is telling them, hey, you need to buy some rentals. So I am working with some of those people, and they have different strategies. Some of them are just looking for, renting and then long-term appreciation. So that's, that. And then I work with, with builders, and then myself, my play is again, if I can find something in an up and coming area where there is some new construction, but not a lot. And when I say new construction, don't think about like master plan communities. Think about an urban core in an older neighborhood where you buy one home, you knock it down, you build one home, right? That's the kind of building. And so if I can buy some of those homes, rent them out, and builders do the same strategy. And then when I'm ready to build in 2, 3, 4 years, whenever it may be, I have my pipeline of lots, although there's a house on it at the time, to build. So that's the other strategy. Those are the main strategies that I'm looking into in terms of like the people that I service and what I like to invest in right now.
No, that says it's two things. One, it's brilliant. Two, it says they have a lot of confidence in you, and because you are just in our conversation here for the last hour or so, you're just working ahead. You're trying to stay way out in front of the buyers and every possible need, and it just shows for someone who's looking for a top agent in the greater Tampa area to give Craig a call, because you're out there, you're seeing what's going on, what's coming down the road as far as you can legitimately see, and give them, hopefully put them in the best possible position. I'm going to second the last question. I'm going to ask one more question after this. We've talked about a lot of the good part of this question of, you've told some stories here that answer what the main part of this question is, but the follow-up part of it is, what do you actually say in an upfront buyer conversation, and has the forced transparency changed how buyers respond to you? To speak to those agents out there right now, what do you I think it's really asking, like, what are some of the really like deeper questions that the average agent isn't asking? What are you saying to some of these buyers up front that really helps you service them?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta set myself apart from other agents. And so I gotta give them a lot of value at the front end now. I really add lots of value at the front end. So it depends on how the buyer comes into me. If it's a referral, then that's pretty simple. We do a buyer consultation.
You already have a credibility standard because you got referred.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. If it's an online lead and they come in on a property that they want to see, that's a whole different process. And so I don't sign a buyer brokerage agreement, a blanket one up front. I'll sign one just specific to that house.
Right.
And then, we'll talk more after the house, see if it's somebody that I want to work with, see if that's a conversation to have. And then I will do the buyer consult, either before the next showing or maybe after the second showing. And so, but in terms of like, I have a whole presentation that I take people through, and I do a whole needs analysis and all that stuff. It's a very consultative approach, but I have how I add value. It comes back to adding value. And one of the things that I do is I really hammer home that I work with them as a fiduciary, because in Florida, most agents are considered to be a transaction broker unless they have a single agent relationship disclosure in writing, which there's a lot of brokerages that don't even let their agents represent clients as a single agent. They require them to be a transaction broker, some large brokerages, right? And so I try not to ever work as a transaction broker. I might do it once or twice every couple of years, but I don't like it, because if something doesn't go according to plan, one person feels that, there's favoritism going on, right? Whether there is or there isn't, right? So I explain to them the fiduciary benefits of that. I explain to them, how I add value and how I'm able to negotiate, much better deals. And then I'll show them some case studies and stories on exactly how I do what I do, because one of my mentors used to always say, proof over promise. And so I've tried to think about that in my structuring of my consultation approach and my marketing, and anything that I do is to really show them proof. And that's why I love that the day of Zoom meetings is phenomenal for me, because I can literally just go through proof after proof after proof quickly, easily, and efficiently on a Zoom meeting. And it's harder to do that when you're meeting in person, because you got to have printouts or you got to this and that. You could have an iPad presentation, but right. My opinion, Zoom is powerful.
When you say that, makes me think, well, they're used to doing it, whether they're using the Microsoft, inner office, but that when they're on a call and they're one-on-one or one-on-two, and they're having a meeting at work, they're focused on it. And so when you put them in that atmosphere for a buyer's consultation or these discussions, they're very focused, and the conversation is a little different, because their mindset is, hey, I'm on a call, I'm one-on-one, I got to be focused, and we're talking business, and we need to answer these questions so that Craig can service us great. I could think that's probably one of the leverage points of using Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes It makes the presentation process that much, for me, a lot more effective and more efficient. I love it. And then also, like, now I used to be able to send like buyers or sellers, like if a property sold down the street or whatever, or let's just say the property we're looking at, let's just say it sold 3 years ago and now they're asking a lot more money for it. Well, the natural question that a buyer has is, well, what kind of work do they do to their property? I used to be able to send them out of the MLS the old listing from when it sold, and they could see all the photos, and I could point out, in the email or whatever. But now I can't do that. Like, they changed the privacy rules. So when I send them a listing that's sold, it's only the first photo. They can't view any of the other photos. But on Zoom, I can go through each and every photo with them, and we can look at them together. So it's really effective for a number of reasons.
Great piece of advice for anyone listening there. Just a little tidbit of another reason to use Zoom. But it's one of the things you've mentioned it a few times, relationships, in building relationships, especially with these out of town buyers. But even if they're local, and it's just more convenient for you guys to jump on a Zoom call because it's 7:00 at night and the family stuff's going on, but they can get on there with 30 minutes with you to see each other's face versus talking over the phone and converse, and then obviously having the tools to learn how to use Zoom, how to pull up these other things so you can show them on the screen real quick of those situations to prove your point, or obviously make it like you said, try to add so much value up front. They have no other choice but Craig.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the clear, logical choice.
Right. Well, this last question is the clear, logical choice. I want to just finish with this one. Why do you love real estate?
Well, no deal is the same. No transaction is the same. And so you're constantly finding yourself in new experiences, and you're constantly learning new every day, something new every day. Every transaction, I do my best to debrief after the transaction and say, all right, what went well? What could we have improved upon? And then I look at my systems and processes, because, everybody on my team knows, I say it over and over again, we fall to the level of our systems and processes. And so if something goes wrong, my mind immediately says, is this a people problem? Meaning the person did not follow the system or process, or is it a system process? Either way, I'm going to get it corrected. And so all my systems and processes, they're evolving, they're changing daily. So that's one thing I enjoy. But then, more so the meaning of it, like, it's a big deal. I mean, when somebody's buying a home, they spend more time there than anywhere else. And it really adds to the quality and the richness of their life. So much more beyond just the asset value, right? Because it is an asset as well. However, the kids are going to grow up there. They're going to spend time with their spouses there. They might go through some health challenges there. They're going to go through some of the biggest life milestones in that home. And so that's really rewarding to me. And then the second aspect is like the new development. That's always rewarding. That's why I got into the new home building industry. When I was 22 years old, 23 years old, my first project, we were, it was a cow pasture, and prior to building it. And just being able to go through the phases of raw land, cow pasture, and then, building some of the streets and nobody living there, and then fully built and developed with, people walking their dog, jogging, bicycle riding with their child. It's really, really cool. It's something that's tangible in that situation. You can see it with your own two eyes, and it's just very rewarding to be part of those types of things, because I have to get meaning from my work. If I don't get meaning from my work, it doesn't matter how much money I make. Ultimately, I'm not going to be fulfilled.
Well, there's no doubt, Craig, through the stories, anyone listening could tell you're very passionate. That's why I know you love what you do, because you're passionate and you want to get better and better and better at it, because obviously the next transaction, the next person you meet, the next challenge, as you mentioned, all really fed in. If we told the story, read this transcript, you expressed in these stories your passion for real estate and to be good at it, in which you are. And so anyone looking to buy and sell, and agents who are, in the area, obviously in the show notes, we're going to have Craig's links and his contact information. Reach out to him. Obviously, if you're in the Tampa area and maybe you want to join a great real estate team, I don't know, reach out to Craig. I'm sure he'd have a cup of coffee with you and talk about how to do that. But anything you'd like to finish with, Craig?
No, I really appreciate you having me on. You had really great questions, made me really think about, things within the business,
Hmm.
gave me even new ideas, brainstorming on ways that I can improve or things that I can add to my business. And so I appreciate you bringing your, preparation to make this, for me, a great process and a great experience. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate you. You'll be getting some. I'm going to send you over some of the raw materials, and Reed Tomato's going to send you some blogs and so forth, probably within the next few days and so forth as I upload the transcript to him. But I appreciate you coming on. I know we went a little bit longer than I expected, but it was a great conversation.
No, it was a great conversation. So again, I really appreciate your time, Tracy. Thank you. Everything is first class. So thank you.
Appreciate it, sir. All right. You have a great day.
This may be it for today's episode of Real Estate Excellence, but we both know your pursuit of excellence doesn't stop here. To connect with the best of the best and really take your skills to the next level, join our community by visiting TracyHayesPodcast.com, where you'll meet more like-minded individuals looking to expand their inner circle and their personal experience. That's available at TracyHayesPodcast.com.